Do you still sit here and say you have never been with underage girls? Can you really say that? Have you done anything that you regret? Have you done anything wrong? That you have never held anybody against their will?
You ready?
Ready?
Yeah. Here we go. I'm Scott Rouse. I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train law enforcement in the military in interrogation and body language. And I created the #1 online body language course, Body Language Tactics, with Greg Hartley. Mark?
I'm Mark Bowden. I'm an expert in human behavior and body language. I help people all over the world to stand out, win trust, and gain credibility every time they communicate, including some of the leaders of the G7. Chase.
Hey, I'm Chase Hughes. I'm a behavior expert, retired U.S. military. Nowadays, I teach intelligence agencies and the general public in persuasion, influence, and rapid behavior profiling. Greg?
I'm Greg Hartley. I'm a former Army interrogator, interrogation instructor, resistance to interrogation instructor. I've written 10 books on body language and behavior, and I spend most of my time on Wall Street or corporate America.
If this is your first time here, go ahead and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Just takes a second to hit that little red button down there and then hit the little red bell, and that'll let you know when we have something come out. All right. Well, today we're going to talk about the Gayle King interview with R. Kelly. And it's going to be a little bit contentious because a lot of people are on one side, and a lot of people are on the other side of that. Is he innocent or is he guilty? In our case, we don't care. We don't go along those lines. We don't care if somebody's innocent or somebody's guilty. Whatever they are is what they are. All we do here is tell you what we're looking at in their body language, what it looks like to us as we're looking at these videos. That's all we're doing. We're Switzerland. We could not possibly care less. All right?
Yeah.
Ready? Let's get started.
Do you still sit here and say you have never been with underage girls? Can you really say that?
I sit here and say this. I had 2 cases back then that I said in the beginning of the interview that I would not talk about because of my ongoing case now.
Okay.
Right? Okay, fair enough. But I will tell you this. People are going back to my past. Okay? That's exactly what they're doing. They're going back to the past, and they're trying to add all of this stuff now to that, to make all of the stuff that's going on now feels real to people.
But the past is relevant with you with underage girls.
Absolutely no, it's not.
Why?
Because for one, I beat my case. When you beat something, you beat it.
You were acquitted.
We can't double jeopardy me like that. You can't. It's not fair. It's not fair to nobody. When you beat your case, you beat your case.
All right, Greg, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start. First of all, we're all probably going to say something about this, but if I'm ever in trouble, don't bring a Gayle King, please. Bring anybody else, not Gayle King. She is a great interview. We all appreciate her in this thing, and we'll point out why along the way. She starts off with that blink rate that says she's a little frustrated with him, which is an indicator. And then here's a thing that a friend of mine brought to my attention a long time ago. Great friend named Preston Gregory, rest his soul, said to me one time, you can be as passionate as you want to because you're white. If I'm passionate, people think I'm angry. And that's something to pay attention to because often people perceive the angry black man problem when someone is passionate. And he's passionate here. This first part, he's passionate. He's a little frustrated maybe. There's no anger in him here. You see, he's walking through this conversation. I think he believes whatever he's saying. You know, truth and belief are different things often, but I think he believes what he's saying. And if you don't believe that, pay attention to him as he's gesturing. His hands are saying the same thing as he illustrates. Those things that punctuate our thoughts is congruent with the words he's using. And then when he gets to the point where he's saying, I beat my case. Now, I'm also going to share one last comment after this, but when he says, I beat my case, he sets his jaw and he's determined. He's finished. He's made his point. I'll also tell you there's a lot of what I refer to as chaff and redirect. I'm going to start with chaff and redirect, and you're going to hear me say it over and over and over in here. It's his communication style, but he's certainly passionate, and all that body movement and all that facial movement, you need to be cautious how you read that. That's my take on this first session. And Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Good call out there. Yeah, the last person you want is Gayle King in front of you. She is excellent at what she does. Yes, her blink rate is up. So there's frustration. There's maybe a little bit of nervousness there. She knows the job she has to do here. It's a big job she's got in front of her. We'll see how brilliantly she does throughout this. I sit here and say this. That isn't an answer to the question. Okay, so he's already starting off by not giving a yes or no answer. I sit here and say this. The storytelling has already started. The lyricism that he has, the poetry that he places down has already started as well. And I'll take you through the poetry that he lays down throughout all of this. But he instantly rocks from side to side as that happened. As Greg often says, the chained elephant starts immediately there. I agree with what you're saying there, Greg, around the idea of, a passionate person of color is going to look to some aggressive immediately, okay? But we do see down in the foot already some movement happening in his foot, which in my view, we're already seeing that energy building up. And I would be looking at that and going, there could be some true anger, some true aggression on its way. But we're not seeing it in him right now in the mass of the body. That's just passion that he has there. So I'm interested that you're absolutely right. His illustrators are spot on. They're congruent. He starts, I'm very bad at the left and the right thing, but I'm going to go, he starts over here. He maps out the past over here. There's the present here. There's some other elements over here, but we're going to come back to that because that's going to get mixed up a little bit later on. So keep that in mind there. Sacred space, as you often say, Greg, on that is, it is not, and that clarity on not and the sacred space around that. I got that as well, Greg, that downward strike with the chin there to illustrate how clear he wants to be. It's actually quite a good start for him. Some real clarity, some real congruence there. So, a good start for this one. Scott, what have you got?
All right. I agree with you, Mark, on that, the part where he's chosen his left side as the past, because if you'll notice, now, I'm not an I guy. Greg and I used to argue about this. Well, I didn't argue. I just listened. But Greg would tell me about all this stuff. He's recalling from the left. And sometimes he'll go there for a second, then he'll get started. Sometimes he'll just pop over there, then back really quickly. So what's going on? Here's what we're seeing body language wise. I'm not going to focus as much on what he's saying as I usually focus on the words that go along, but we're just going to I'll talk mostly about the body language we're seeing. As he's wiggling back and forth, he's bracing himself because he's ready for this answer. Throughout this, you'll see he's been prepped. On a lot of this, some questions he hasn't been prepped for, but on this one, he's ready. He has the answer and he knows it and he's getting ready because he looks down, recalls it, then he gets prepared and boom, then he delivers. And that's what he's doing here in classic sense. In other words, he chambers it like you would your ammunition. Then he aims and he fires. That's what we're seeing him do here. He's showing his request for approval, and the foot. We see this plays an intricate part almost throughout these videos because in some cases, he's putting his foot down to say, that's the answer. That's the way it is. That's it. And other ones, he's using it as an adapter because he'll use both feet. I think in just one video, he does both. And then so after he answers that first question, that's when he does the first tap. And she says, the past is relevant to you and underage girls. That's when that happens. That's when he pats his foot here. When he starts explaining, no, it isn't. That's when we see that. And that part about I beat my case, I just said I wasn't going to talk about words, but I'm going to now. That's not good from his attorney's perspective because he would never tell him to say that. It's worded poorly. He would say, as she did, you've been acquitted. He should have said, or I would have said, I've been acquitted of all charges. That's what you want to say. It sounds professional. And it says, hey, I didn't get in trouble for that. But he says, I beat my case. Like he got around it. That's what I got on that. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, completely agree with you guys. And at the beginning here, we have a failure to deny commission. So failure to deny commission is a pretty big deal because most people who didn't do something would say they didn't do it. And we don't have any denial here. And this time referencing behavior that you guys are talking about is really fascinating to me, that he starts on one side. So his past is on his left and moves to his right, where 90% of people are. We read left to right. Most of the world does. And we view timelines the same way. But if I know that he strongly references timelines as an interrogator, when I'm asking him a question about what he wants to do in the future, I'm going to move to his right when I'm asking that question. If I'm asking him about what happened before, I'm using that hand to gesture to force him, because he references timelines with his behavior. So I'm kind of forcing that out of him. So that's a good interrogation technique you can take with you. And this whole thing is generalizing and externalizing. I think we're dealing with someone who's convinced themselves that they have an external locus of control. And we're going to see more of that later. And that's actually very helpful in an interrogation scenario when you're dealing with someone with an external locus. That makes getting a confession a lot easier. This eyebrow flash that he's doing is a request for approval, but you'll see it more with people who are celebrities, because when they make an eyebrow flash, people are 1,000 times more likely to return the eyebrow flash and nod along with them because of their social status. So he has been trained over the last several years to use this gesture in order to get compliance from other people, and he's using it here. It's not working. She's not returning. So we see him start to ramp up a little bit after he sees that, well, all my groupies do this. So the guys at the production studio do the same thing, and it's not working here anymore. So it's more likely to be seen in high status people. There's a slip up with his timeline when he's talking about past over here, the present's right here, and he talks about the future over here. See if you can spot it. Put it in the comments. He makes a mistake. I'm just saying mistake here. That's non-linear to his timeline process. And when he says, when you beat your case, he uses the word you, not I, not my case. When you beat your case, that's it. So we see a shift from self pronouns, my case. We see him externalizing. We're seeing a shift from self pronouns to talking about other people. So when you beat your case, we're externalizing and making it more acceptable for social behavior. Other people do this. This is normal, and you can relate to this, so I'll use the word you. And that's all I got.
Hey, a couple of things I would point out. You said he's learned to do it. I don't think when you say he's trained to do it, I don't think we mean formally trained. I mean, once you do it a million times, people pick up on it. And that adds the second piece for me. This is R. Kelly. This is not John down the street. This is a guy who comes with a certain amount of brand and baggage that goes with that brand in the same way any celebrity does. You already have a little space in your head. We already have put a little piece of real estate in there for who he is. And you have made up your mind by now, if you're watching this, whether he did this, he didn't do this, whether he did the past cases, he didn't do the past cases. And we're going to piss some of you off. But along the way, what you need to realize is all that baggage comes along with it for all of us. I would assume, even for Gayle King sitting right across the table from him. So here we are. All of us have that, and we all have to work through it.
Excellent. All right. We good?
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Do you still sit here and say you have never been with underage girls? Can you really say that?
I sit here and say this. I had 2 cases back then that I said in the beginning of the interview that I would not talk about because of my ongoing case now.
Okay.
Right? Okay, fair enough. But I will tell you this. People are going back to my past, okay? That's exactly what they're doing. They're going back to the past, and they're trying to add all of this stuff now to that, to make all of the stuff that's going on now feels real to people.
But the past is relevant with you with underage girls.
Absolutely no, it's not.
Why?
Because for one, I beat my case. When you beat something, you beat it.
You were acquitted.
We can't double jeopardy me like that. You can't. It's not fair. It's not fair to nobody. When you beat your case, you beat your case.
Were any of you guys wondering whether he's left-handed or right-handed?
He's right-handed.
He is right-handed.
He's right-handed.
He's
Yeah.
gripping his left hand with his right hand.
Okay.
But he's also
a lot of that.
Yes,
a lot of
you're
this
right.
stuff.
He did. Yeah. He has been.
Yep.
Yeah. You're right. He's dominant. He's going for his dominant power actions with his right hand.
Mark, I'll have to send you a behavior compass.
Yes.
You know, get your frontal lobe ready.
Yeah.
Amazon.com.
And that's Chase Hughes with the behavior compass. Let's move along.
Never be lost. Never be lost in behavior.
It was reported that your income was very high. Hundreds of millions of dollars, we'll say that. because I don't want to get hung up on
now,
the
that's
semantics.
one room I wish that was true.
And yet when you were in jail last week, the bond was $100,000. And they said R. Kelly couldn't even afford to get himself out of jail, that a friend had to come and bail you out of jail. What is your financial situation, if you don't mind saying?
Here's the deal. So many people have been stealing my money. People was connected to my account. I went by myself for the first time to Bank of America. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know what the hell was going on.
When did you do that? First time by yourself?
About 3 weeks ago to a month.
3 weeks ago was the first time you went to Bank of America?
Absolutely.
By yourself?
By myself. Because I was so tired of not knowing where my money was, where my publishing is.
Isn't that on you then?
Huh?
Isn't that on you?
A lot of it's on me.
That you didn't know where your money is?
A lot of it's on me.
And people say he doesn't have money because he had to pay so much in settlements. What do you say about that?
Lie.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
We see that anti-gravity foot gesture again, but when it's him being called rich, which I think is notable here, and you're going to see it later. And when he's talking about the bank account in the past, he's talking about a bank account, and he says Bank of America. He's referencing towards his future side, off to the right of his timeline. And I thought that was pretty interesting, that maybe he switched banks. That's what I would think, or this is a new bank. And he's nodding for approval, and there's an admission of fault to build connection. And you'll notice he's in the truth plane when he's admitting the fault. His hands are open, as Mark coined the term. And when he recalls that he went to the bank, we see an eye movement to about 11 o'clock. This is going to come up later too. So take a look at that when it comes back up. And when she probes him and she starts digging a little bit more, his blink rate goes from 11 to 88 in less than 2 seconds. And I think that's pretty important. Blink rate is directly associated most of the time with stress. So we're feeling stressed, we blink a little bit more often. And he's shaking his head no when he's saying it's on me. Granted, we don't always, this mismatch doesn't always mean deception, but I think it could mean disagreement in this case. So there's no admission of anything specific. Nothing specific is coming forth from any of these questions whatsoever. And he says, where my money was, there's a past gesture, and where my publishing is, which is present tense usage, and his hands go towards the right. So I think that something is in the works for him with publishing. And finally here at the end, when he starts to admit his fault, there's lip licking at the very tail end of this video to improve personal appearance. When we do hygienic gestures, like you're asking someone a question, and as they hear what the question is, they go, mm-hmm. This is all gestures to improve our appearance or make us look better, called hygienic. And that's what we're seeing right there, as far as I'm concerned. Scott?
All right. As far as the banks go and his publishing, Chase, having been in that business for a long time, when you're dealing with publishing is a whole different thing. This might be his personal account, but on that level, you have more than one account. There's not a bank account. You might have your personal bank account where you go and take all your money out and do whatever it is you're going to do, buy stuff and go nuts and stuff. But the big money, where it comes rolling in from publishing, they take a part of that and put that in there for you. You've got that all worked out. If he hadn't been to the bank in that long to check on what's going on or doesn't know how to check on it, then I would put all my chips on the little thing that says, no, there's more than one account. I know there is. That's the way you do that. So, and then some is funneled into his Bank of America or whatever his bank is there. The first thing we see him do is he puts that hand up, and he's using it for two things. He's using it as a barrier as it comes up. And then it's an adapter. He's pushing on his face, and that's called facial denting or facial distortion when he goes in there and does that. And then the classic, here's Greg saying, chaff and redirect. What's your financial situation? He rarely does he answer a question. He does on down the road here in a minute, and does a great job of it. But here, again, it's just chaff and redirect. He doesn't say anything. And the word absolutely comes up again. We heard it earlier, and we heard it here, and we're going to hear it throughout. That word, I call it the word, and say the word came up. Because a lot of times when people say absolutely, Who says absolutely? Guilty people. It looks to me like. That's the only time I ever hear. I never ask my wife something. Are we having hot chicken? She'll go, absolutely. If she did, I'd be like, yeah, you get me. But she wouldn't do that. That's not in her vernacular to use it, or anybody's I know to use that word. So the first time you're at the bank, is this the first time you're at the bank by yourself? That's when we see that his head does almost a circle. It's not even a bobble. It's not a yes or no. It's like this because he's unsure. He knows that's not true, but he's going along. They may have seen him at the bank. Somebody may know that he knows one of those girls that he supposedly had at the house. If that happened, they may have seen him in the bank on his computer. You never know. So something's not right there for me. That's when I would start saying, that's when I'd poke around a little bit more in there, as Greg would say, and say, hey, man, let's talk about this a little bit more about when you were actually there last. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Certainly on this absolutely thing, we can. There's a lot of clusters around this whole banking issue. As Chase said, he's in the future with the banking. I would want him to be in his past with that. So that's a flag for me. He rocks from side to side before all of that. He's like, here's the deal. He doesn't answer the question. King, who is the best out there that you can see, she picks up on it as well. She wants to jump in and question that. She's seeing more data than we are at this moment. So my guess is if she's going into that, there's something up with that. And then he answers with, absolutely, it was. That for me starts to go, we've got to now watch out for this word absolutely, because it seems to come around moments where we now know his probability of lying has gone right up there. So let's watch out for that word. There's a lot of blocking. I'm already seeing the suppression of his right leg, which we're suspecting he is right-handed. That's his dominant leg. So I'm already thinking the passion is rising, and I'm looking for that leg. I'm already thinking he's going to stand. He's got a lot of energy in that leg already. You know, that could start rising even more. She's cranking him up as well at the same time. She's already interrupting him. He has this lyricism to him again, which we'll talk about further on. And one of the things that seems to annoy him is if you interrupt his lyric, if you interrupt his rhythm, he has to go back on some words and restart, because he's got something quite romantic going on with this lyricism that he's able to have. And he's got these kind of looks that he's able to give Gayle to try and bring her in and tease her into this story. But she's brilliant. She is having none of it. She's totally interrupting his usual patterns on this. Fantastic to watch. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, Mark, I'm going to start where you left off. The whole thing for me here is I think we're seeing a baseline, a normal for R. Kelly when he's talking to somebody and when he says, I wish that rumor were true, that's him. I don't know anything about him except what I've seen in interviews and that, but I'll bet you when he's hanging out and talking to people he likes, he'd talk like that. Yeah, I wish that were true. And hundreds of millions of dollars might not be true, but tens of millions maybe. I mean, music is music. And Scott, the expert, could probably tell us kind of what he thinks about that. But if you turn off the sound and go back and watch this over, you'll see him doing this kind of body English thing where he's drawing with his eyes, and he's, to your point, he's trying to entice Gayle King in. And then she does a great body language thing too, a great body English thing where she goes, really? And turns her head. The whole thing is beautiful to watch because you can see him trying to draw in her disbelief. Interesting. And then she's masterful at questioning when. She doesn't let him go with saying, I just recently went. He answers with a vague response 3 or 4 weeks ago. Well, if it's a hot issue and people have been stealing from you, you're probably trying to build a case. So I go, yeah, okay. Remember, communication styles are different. People are different. But then we do see a little bit of this request for approval and a little grief mixed into that. And you do start to see that lip licking and things starting to rise. I think you're starting to see some rise because he knows she's not going to give him a break. And he realizes how good a questioner she is too. Now, there's a lot more coming along. I'll leave with this. You guys covered most everything. The absolute thing, I agree. When somebody says absolutely and they never say it, it means something. They always feel like they have to emphatically do it. I know people who say it just kind of as a absolutely. If you say, do you want to go to the store, that kind of thing. But it's a pattern for them. It's not a one-off. It's not an orphan. We look for orphans and speech pattern changes in people. So far, I don't see him ramped or angry or any of that kind of thing yet. And you do see he's demonstrative. We always say entertainers are demonstrative. Mark, your big movement. It's the nature of people who stand and hold a stage, and this guy can hold a stage. So I don't read too much into his hand movement and that kind of thing, but vague answers and trying to be, kind of R. Kelly and amusing, I do see that. So that's what I got.
Yeah, I agree. I think what we're seeing is a performance a lot of times because he knows what he's going to say, so he's selling it.
And I think he has in his past, at least, I don't know where he's at now. I think he's in jail at the moment, but I think he's perceived as quite the ladies' man. Mm-hmm. And, if that's the case and he's drawing with his eyes, that drawing with your eyes is part of what people do. I look over at somebody and turn away and then look back and draw them with your eyes. That's natural. It's what we all do. Some people are better at it than others.
So there's something people might want to look at as we're talking about, just how big he is and how he draws people in, and that, there's a level of sexuality around that as well that he's playing on. There's something called histrionic personality disorder. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist at all, but you might want to look around histrionic personality disorder and see what some of the traits are and what happens and what they get up to, and wonder, might that be a possibility here.
And guys, one of the things I want to say here, Mark, you're dead on. One of the things that people always say is you're not a psychologist. No, we're technicians. And what we're really good at is finding, as interrogators, what you look for is what are the symptoms that this person displays that tell me what I should do to go next? So we spend a fair amount of our lives looking for those symptoms and clusters and looking for the receptors to the things we do to get people to talk.
And Greg said that before we got started, before you got on, we were waiting on you. Yeah, he said, or was it a phone call? We were talking on the phone, I think, and you said, I see what's going on here. Or you had a suspicion that's what was happening.
Yeah.
So
and I can't say that's what it is, but I agree with you, Mark. When you start seeing patterns, you look and say, and people, people live in a box. That box dictates who they become. And if what you've done always worked, that's what you'll always do.
It was reported that your income was very high. Hundreds of millions of dollars, we'll say that, because I don't want to get hung up on the semantics.
That's one room I wish that was true.
And yet when you were in jail last week, the bond was $100,000. Mm-hmm. And they said R. Kelly couldn't even afford to get himself out of jail, that a friend had to come and bail you out of jail. What is your financial situation, if you don't mind saying?
Here's the deal. So many people have been stealing my money. People was connected to my account. I went by myself for the first time to Bank of America. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know what the hell was going on.
When did you do that? First time by yourself?
About 3 weeks ago to a month.
3 weeks ago was the first time you went to Bank of America? Absolutely. By yourself?
By myself. Because I was so tired of not knowing where my money was, where my publishing is.
Isn't that on you then?
Huh?
Isn't that on you?
A lot of it's on me.
That you didn't know where your money is?
A lot of it's on me.
And people say he doesn't have money because he had to pay so much in settlements. What do you say about that?
Lie.
All right. Here we go.
Have you done anything that you regret? Have you done anything wrong?
Lots of things wrong when it comes to women that I apologize. But I apologize in those relationships at the time I was in the relationships.
Have you broken any laws when it comes to women?
Absolutely not.
Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I see a deviation from baseline when he goes absolutely not, when he's talking about the thing. I also see trading guilt, where you admit to one thing and you're saying, okay, here's a big deal, I did do this. And everybody could say they've been kind of a jerk in a relationship, I'm sure. Maybe some people can't. I probably am not one of those. But you could say, have you ever done anything criminal? And he goes, absolutely not. The whisper, that lowering his voice, it doesn't sound genuine. I'm sure she knows it's not genuine. And he's looking at her and raises that brow, and he's got a little grief muscle involved. For me, it's a baseline deviation from what he's done to now. Why would I believe that? And she's good at saying the masterful question, why? She'll get to it. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Yeah, at the top of that, when he comes in with the that first answer, man, he's strong. You know, I've done. Have you done anything wrong? Yeah, I've done a lot wrong. But we see him kick again over there to the left to recall. I think he's thinking about things he's done wrong in his past. And so it's that strong affirmation with that big head nod. That's what I'm talking about there at the top of that. And he gives a straight answer. One of the few times he does that. Then she says, have you broken any laws? He locks eyes with her. And then he guards his crotch again, which he did in the first time. And then he whispers the absolutely not. And again, it's just a hint of the grief muscle we see through there. We don't see a whole lot. I don't think he's been Botoxed because he's got a lot of wrinkles and stuff like that, like I've got. But we don't see much of the grief muscle at all in there. Little, if any. Okay, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so he says he apologized in those, I can't do my left and right, in those relationships, but he's doing it, he's gesturing in his future. He's not gesturing in his past. You know, from our baseline right at the start, where he seems very certain about what he's saying, he's got his timeline muddled up now. So I'm unsure that he ever apologized in those relationships. I don't think that is true at all. He's also locked down his feet. His feet were much more buoyant throughout, and they've stopped moving on this. So I think this is a big question for him that he's locking down on. And have you broken the law? Absolutely not. We can all, you know that tone change is so different that it is almost comical. It's so extreme. So I don't think we're buying that. I don't think you're buying that at all. Chase, what do you got?
I think we see an ambiguous answer here. So if I say, Mark, what'd you do after work Wednesday night? And Mark goes, I usually go straight home. That's not an answer at all. And for the first question here, there was no answer. And we see some of that 3 o'clock recall, which you guys have pointed out. But then it shifts to that downward emotional recall, to where I think it was Scott, you pointed that out. Maybe you're thinking about what was going on. There's some more eyebrow flashing as eyebrows are going up, some requests for approval in there. And when he's talking about apology, he goes towards his future reference, towards his right. And I thought that was interesting, that the apologies took place in his physical space of where the future lies. And the head shake in denial when he says absolutely not, or when he says no, are timed very well. They happen in sync, which would indicate truth. Please keep in mind, we need a cluster of behaviors to say someone's telling the truth or someone's not telling the truth. And none of us are familiar with this case enough to be experts on the case. We're experts on behavior. We can all say that. But we are not experts on the case. And that's not what we're doing here. And at the very end, when he's doing this, he does what my mentor called an exhalatory denial. And we see these most commonly, even you can look on YouTube, in cases where reputation is that person's most important asset. So we see it in the Anthony Weiner case. We see it in a Bill Clinton interview. I can't remember who the interviewer was. But we see exhalatory denials where reputation tends to be what's really on the line for that person individually, because that's what matters to that person. That's all I got.
Nice.
A couple of things for me, guys. When he's doing that down left, when you ask the question, I think that's internalizing the question. When he asked, and I was going to mention this and forgot, when she asked a question, have you ever done anything wrong in relationships? He's internalizing the question, and that calculation, that, hey, how do I answer this, comes up. That's not lying or telling the truth. It's simply internalizing and understanding how to approach it. And then the other piece is, I'm not sure about the timeline thing with him. Some people don't do timeline, past, present, future. They just are all over the place with their hands because that's the way they talk. And, microcultures play a huge part in that. So I'm not sure he's not just moving his hands to move his hands. So
I certainly think it's out of it's out of what we saw in two of the other videos.
Right.
So certainly it strikes me as, of course,
it'll be interesting
to not prove perfect, but it strikes me as odd.
Yeah, and I think it's worth discussing that, because I think seeing all that movement, I think he moves a lot. It's just kind of I think it goes with the whole chaff and redirect. If I throw enough stuff out, something will stick. Mm-hmm. That's just part of it, in my opinion.
Have you done anything that you regret? Have you done anything wrong?
Lots of things wrong when it comes to women that I apologize, but I apologize in those relationships at the time I was in the relationships.
Have you broken any laws when it comes to women?
Absolutely not.
All right. You good?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the point you're making is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you have never held anybody against their will.
I don't need to. Why would I?
Well,
how stupid would it be for R. Kelly, with all I've been through in my way, way past, to hold somebody, let alone 4, 5, 6, 50, you said. How stupid would I be to do that?
What do you got, Greg?
Yeah, this one, I just see him. He gets the opportunity to deny. And of course, he goes, deny it. But he uses the resume statement to use your point, Chase. Why would I do it? Why would I need to? He could stop right there and probably sound a lot more believable than going on about with all my trouble in my way, way past. And Mark, here, I'm seeing exactly what you and Chase are talking about. He is going way, way past. Now, if he deviates again, we'll look at that closely. But I don't see a whole lot of, I think this is when he came prepared for. I'm R. Kelly. I don't need to do that. I think that's the approach he's taken. His resume statement is demonstrative. It's bold. It's all that stuff, all that indignation. And whether he did something or not, I think there's a part of him I think believes some of whatever he's saying. Now, whether it's true or not, again, don't know. But that demonstrative chin up, indignation, why would I do that way in the past? It all the body language together makes him look like he's telling you the truth. That's what I got. Chase, what do you got?
When you watch this in just a second, again, I want you to look for if there is a denial there. There's ambiguity, there's no denial, and there's an immediate shift to third person reference. It goes from first person to third person, which is going to be extremely important in the next few minutes when we watch the next few videos here. And he's using way, way in the past very strongly physically. And I want you to just consider the psychology of this for a moment and entertain the idea that he sees time as a cleansing force. That maybe if something happened a long time ago and I've become a different person, I don't need to face charges for that stuff. I'm not the same person anymore. So time is a cleansing force for him. And when he said this isn't bad or horrible, it's a stupid idea. It's a stupid idea. That would be stupid for me to do this. Not mean, not horrible to human beings, not rude, not disrespectful, not a bad person. That's just a stupid idea. I think that's interesting. It might be a window in how he thinks about the alleged victims of these crimes. That it's just a bad decision. It seems like being a bad thing to do to a person might be the default for most people, but that's just my viewpoint. Mark?
I think there's something very, very interesting there, Chase, around time and cleansing. And I think forgiveness as well will come up further along the line. Again, this is all part of his poetry, all part of his lyric throughout this. R. Kelly is not stupid. Well, that's the kind of a resume statement that distances at the same time. And yeah, R. Kelly is not stupid. What about Robert? How's Robert doing on this one? Because there is also a couple of personas often at play here. There's R. Kelly, the performer, and then there's Robert as well, who is the person who is at home, and then when they're out of the home, and on stage, transforms, or that aspect comes forward, which is R. Kelly. So it's interesting that he distances there and creates this resume statement. Gayle King, again, top performer. Like she's giving him full on chin jut there. She's going right in with the chin. She's doing a little bit of eye aversion. I think she's smart in that she'll give a bit of chin jut and then her eyes will just dash away, so as not to provoke too much. But she's really finding that moderate line as how to crank him up there. And during that, he is ramping up right now. It's working on him. Now, whether you want to see that as ramping up on passion or ramping up on aggression, as Greg's been saying, you know, everybody needs to check themselves and kind of go, okay, what are my assumptions about this man in front of me? And therefore, you know, how accurate am I going to be as to, is this aggression that's ramping, or is this just passion that's ramping up? But certainly, you know, she is holding ground with him. Whether it's his passion is getting high or his aggression is getting high, she's holding her ground there. And that's brilliant to see, especially around, there's this pocket move that goes on. And I'm not sure because of the cut what that's about. I don't know whether, in my mind, I kind of go, maybe he kind of mopped his brow a little bit and maybe put that back and that was cut out. Or maybe, you know, I'm now going, God, is that a self-soothing gesture? I've seen it in some sports professionals that I've watched. When they get anxious, they'll just check their pockets. It's like they'll check, you know, is my phone there? It's like, you don't need to check for your phone. It's not important right now. You don't need to check what's in your pocket. That's not important right now. But it's kind of a go-to comforting move that something might be there. So I'm interested in that. But yeah, it's ramping up now. Who have we got left? Scott?
Yeah. He never says no. He never even answers the question. His answer again is just this. And when he talks about himself in the third person, here's what I've noticed. Having been in that business and been around a lot of people similar to him or, you know, artists, when they start talking about themselves in the third person, usually they're so disconnected from what's going on in the real world, and not like they have, you know, something's wrong with him, but from what's going on in reality. I mean, the world that he's presented with is a lot different than the world we're presented with. Everybody's smiling at him. Everybody's being nice to him. Everybody's trying to give him something. Everybody's trying to do something for him, or everybody's trying to get something from him. You know, get a picture, or do this, do that. When they start talking about themselves in the third person, that's when I start going, man, you know, this person is deep in at this point, deep in. Yeah. And that's, and I think his illustrators are so big because at this point, again, it's showtime for him. He's defending that. And it's like, yeah, da, 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 da. He's got to put on that show. And Mark, you keep going back to the poetry of the whole thing, that how it's like an art going along. That's what he does. He's an artist, and he's delivering like he delivers music. It's we're going to see an emotional delivery in a little while, but everything is coming. A lot of this is coming from the emotional aspect of all that. And again, Gayle King, man, even her voice is just, it's so soothing. It's just, she's got that deep voice, and it's like, you know, if I'm into sound. So when you hear something like that, your eyebrows go up and you start, you know, what? So he may be having a hard time keeping it together because the way she's talking to him, just simply because of the tone of her voice. But she uses that again, like you guys were saying, man, she uses that beautifully. That whole thing, man, she's awesome. She's awesome during this. All right. That's all I got.
So I think the point you're making is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you have never held anybody against their will.
I don't need to. Why would I? Well, how stupid would it be for R. Kelly, with all I've been through in my way, way past, to hold somebody, let alone 4, 5, 6, 50, you said. How stupid would I be to do that?
Yeah.
We good?
It's cool.
Very good. All right.
Good.
Have you ever had sex with anyone under the age of 17?
No.
Never?
No.
I have to tell you, it's so hard to believe that based on all that we've read.
I'm going to tell you something, Gayle. There's one thing. I'm going to tell you something. What the women said about you. What women said about me. So nobody's allowed to be mad at me and be scorned and lie on me.
Mm-hmm. So they're lying on you. That's your explanation. They're lying on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm going to have to disagree with you guys about not wanting to be interviewed by her. That'd be my first choice. Wow.
Yeah.
Chase, what do you got?
I think everybody's done something we regret. All of us, you're watching this right now, we've all done something we wish we didn't do. We've all regretted it. And as time passes, our brain pieces stuff together that says, well, maybe I was in the right. Maybe I did the right thing. Maybe I've grown over that. Maybe, you know, I've done the best I could. I felt bad for a long time, and that's enough. I did my sentence. So we've all done something like that. So we can relate as interrogators to a person, just understanding that the brain automatically tries to rationalize and project automatically. So it's three things that typically happen. We minimize, we rationalize, and we project a lot of the stuff that we are embarrassed about, stuff we wish we hadn't done. We talked about clusters. Let's talk about some clusters. The denial occurs before the question. But when you're watching this, maybe there's something else that happened just before this. I don't know. So I'm going to ignore that completely. There's anti-gravity gesture on the right foot, this moving up during the denial. I'll ignore that as well. So there's a stop gesture with his left hand during this denial. The fingers extend out to see this stop gesture of don't go there. We'll ignore that. Let's keep moving, and we'll build a cluster. Next, we have a final claim. When he's making his final claim, he's shaking his head no before he starts to make the denial. That's a 4 on the behavioral table of elements anyway. This is a deviation from his baseline from every video, and I watched about an hour and a half of his videos to get a baseline this morning. Lip compression during the denial, that's a 4. Hand to face gesture, that's a 4. Emotional eye recall movement, where he's just kind of accessing some emotional state, I'll ignore it. Mismatched gestures, a 4. Repetition of denial times 2. He said it 3 times, but repeated it twice, which would give him an 8. The score here is a 16 plus 4 is 20. So his deception score is 28 here, and he needs an 11 to be graded as likely deceptive during the statement. And I ignored 4 things that could have been scored. So what we're seeing here is a big cluster of behaviors here. And with that long one, Mark, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, the one thing I'd written down here, Chase, was I want to know what Chase ranks this on the table of elements, because I started going through head shakes, eye blocks, lip suppression, self-soothe, incongruence, single shrug, turtling, shrinking. It's like, God, there's such a big cluster in there, and even with you discounting a whole bunch, he's still got that high score. What I'd got before any of that. Oh, by the way, just beautiful chin jut battle between him and Gayle right at the start. I mean, what a battle. Like, they are both going at each other right now on this. There is a strong battle going on between them right now. Amazing to see. But we get that word that I said at the start that I was worried about. We get absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And that, along with that huge cluster, is just too many red flags flying at the same time for me. That's just a huge cluster, I would suggest. Greg, what do you have on this?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back and backtrack over the things you guys have already covered, because there are many of them. Mm-hmm. But when you're a passionate person, you need to stay passionate, especially when you deny something. If I'm passionate and you accuse me of something, I'm going to be very passionate about that, not closed hands, milling fingers. That's what I call sacred space. I've created a barrier, put something between me and you, and I'm grinding my hands. Not eye blocking, not all of those things that you brought up go with it as well. And then there's a thing about cadence. Normal people speak at a certain cadence. I talk fast. Scott talks fast. We have different speeds we talk at and we answer questions at. He's been doing intake, responding, intake. Part of that, I think, is a respect for Gayle King on some level. But suddenly, boom, steps over the question. Did you have sex? No. Well, he's ready for the question. He's overstepping. He's overprepared, but he's locked down tight. You see all that eye blocking. You see the lip licking starting. All this stuff is an indicator that now he's starting to ramp up. And there's no way, it's not passion. This is contained. This is controlled. When you've been this passionate all along and somebody accuses you of the single thing that you could go to jail for so far, you expect a very different approach. Me? No. You don't see the resume statement. You don't see the holy ground. You don't see any of that. He just freezes and does this and does all that nervous energy release. Not very good. Scott, what do you got?
Well, his answer is the answer. That's the one you want. You want the no, I didn't do it. No, I had nothing to do with it. A lot of people are going to think that this thing where he's shaking his head, he's nodding his head yes as he's saying no, they're going to take that, oh, he really was saying yes as he was saying no. Those are confirmation nods. That's different. Now, the second nod, that may indicate he's a little bit unsure because it's not a hardcore full on like that first one. But the third one is definitely a confirmation nod. And that's when you are saying, no, I didn't do it. No, I didn't do it. That's okay. It's not the thing where you're saying yes as you're saying no, or no as you're saying yes a little bit. Those are usually fairly subtle when you find those. You guys have just nailed everything through here. So I'm gonna stop there.
Yeah, I'm all about the subtle. Good.
Yeah.
Have you ever had sex with anyone under the age of 17?
No.
Never?
No.
I have to tell you, it's so hard to believe that based on all that we've read.
I'm going to tell you something, Gayle. There's one thing. I'm going to tell you something. What the women said about you.
What
women said about me. What women. So nobody's allowed to be mad at me and be scorned and lie on me.
Mm-hmm. So they're lying on you. That's your explanation. They're lying on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why would these women say the same thing about you? That you are controlling, that you are abusive, that you tell women when to eat, when to go to the bathroom, when they can sleep, where they can dress. Why would all these women tell these different stories about you if they were not true? And they don't know each other. That defies logic to me.
Right. Until you hear the explanation. Well, you can start a rumor on a guy like me or a celebrity just like that. 30 years in the business, relationships didn't work out. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is push a button on your phone and say, so-and-so did this to me. R. Kelly did this to me. And if you get any traction from that, if you're able to write a book from that, if you're able to get a reality show, okay, one girl, mm-hmm. then any girl that I had a relationship in the past that it just didn't work out, she can come and say the same exact thing.
All right. Since I got squished last time, didn't have anything.
Yeah, you go.
I'm gonna go first this time. So first thing we're seeing is when his head goes down. He's smiling, but he's got that head go down with shame. And when he does his shame thing, that's when we see the stress mouth kick in. Just briefly there, we see that. That's when your lips come together. Some people call it lip grip. Different people have different names for it, but I call it stress mouth. Then that pointer finger, that's a regulator to sort of make her listen up. I think he's used to pointing people and talking to them that way, to put that lightly. So and then his home for recall, again, he shoots off there to the left and takes a look. And his first line of the story, the first time he starts to talk, he looks up to the right. So that's sort of busting what his recall there. So I don't know what that's about. But when he starts to talk, when he's prepped and he's ready to go, that's when he shoots to the left and then starts delivering. And just before that, in a third of a second, we see an entire expression change from one to the other. Because what he's done is he's adjusted from the emotions he's going through at this point and he knows he's got something. So he's like, yeah, here it comes. As he goes into it, he goes into the emotion he had when he was rehearsing this, probably with his attorney or whoever his attorney's hired to work with him on this, to prep him. Because this is a loaded answer. I mean, he's ready for it again. He chambers it, and he aims, and he fires. So he's totally prepped for that. I'll eat the whole thing up. So Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, we see this is a non-denial, and it's entirely hypothetical. So he doesn't deny that it happened at all in this whole thing. So we can't say whether or not he's lying or telling the truth because there's no denial of doing it to begin with. And we see that little jut to about 10:30 o'clock on his eye movements there. And that's followed by some shame or guilt, regret. And he does this rapid eye movement for a very quick period of time here, which is some would call a transderivational search. But we're just kind of looking around for some kind of piece of information that needs to come out next. And when he says, you can start a rumor, now he's shifting from himself to someone else. He's shifting the pronoun to you. And now it's not me anymore or she. And it's you. You can start a rumor on somebody. He's unwilling to make an accusation. This is a big red flag. If you're an interrogator, if you're doing any kind of work, if you're interviewing a babysitter to look after your kids, this is a big red flag. We have shifting pronouns, inability to make denials about something happening. That's a big deal. And when he's saying relationships didn't work out, he gestures to the future for him. I thought that was pretty interesting. Relationships didn't work out, gesturing over where he views the future. And I'm only saying this past, present, future gesture thing with him because it is such a deeply ingrained part of his baseline. And this is a brand new case of the vanishing perpetrator. There is none. There's no names. There's no accusations. Nobody's guilty except for a hypothetical, faceless, nameless person. And nobody's accused of doing anything. Greg.
Yeah, so in this one, there's a couple of interesting things happening. Number one, he's starting to move into a circular logic kind of pattern, so he's going to find a reason things happen to him. And you'll talk about locus of control, but I'll also say people that get into certain kinds of habits will always find a reason something happened. They rationalize why it happened or whatever it is. There's a way to get away. Interestingly, he starts off emphatic with that baton, with that whip, and then suddenly he's like, wait till you hear the answer. Well, what does that mean? That's a stall. And then he goes over to think up the answer, and then he comes back and starts discussing it. That deviation from eye accessing. Guys, when we recall something, I'm not going to tell you everybody recalls something in the same space, but if I recall sounds on the left side, I'm going to recall visual memories on the left side too. It's not going to go visual memory here, auditory memory here. Doesn't work that way. I've never seen that happen. In all the time I've been doing this, once you ask and you get a baseline for memory, it's in the same side of the head typically. So he gets there, he starts to kind of be passionate, and then he starts trying to walk his way through an answer that makes no sense. And when he's doing that, look at his feet. They're all balled up under him and folded under him when he's doing that lip compression. Scott, when he's doing that, I see somebody who doesn't understand limits. I see somebody who is thinking, hey, I'm smart. I'll come up with something. And he probably believes, whether it's true or not, he probably believes that this is true. This is how he got to be a victim. Because I don't see him like rolling on, in like, hey, I better hide this. He's just saying it like it's true. That makes people confused sometimes, because if it looks like it's true and all the body language is there, then people believe it. If you've ever argued with somebody that you're like, when you leave, you think you've dropped 40 IQ points for arguing with them, it's because they're not thinking in linear fashion and they're looking for a reason why it happened and then backfilling to that. And that's what I think we're starting to see here. My opinion, just from watching him, there's no magic to this. It's looking for deviation, emphatic, shifting to, hold on a second, I got to come up with something, shifting to, and watching his feet under him. And then when he gets back out to his pontification, his feet and legs open again. That is confusing for people watching that shift. So if you're confused, no surprise, it is confusing. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so good call there, everybody, on the shame. I saw the shame as well. I see it specifically on the idea of controlling food. And certainly that's when it shows up for me. That's an important link. I think the idea of shameful around this controlling food, one thing you want to do if you want to put people under stress and pressure is not necessarily deny them food, but certainly you decide when they eat and when they don't eat. That's really important to breaking somebody's psyche down. So that's kind of important. Well, talking about control, King is in control at this point. Go back, have a look at how I think she purposely reinterrupts with that defies logic to me. That's broken his lyricism. So actually he stands down at that. He was going to start into something. He stands down. But then he regains control. He comes forward until you hear the explanation. I think you're right, Greg. He's now going, okay, what is my explanation for this? What am I? And it's the songwriter again. And it's like, I got a lyric on this one. And then you really see him take control because he's got rhythm. He's got punctuation. He's got force in there. He's got chop gestures in there. There's an amazing rhythm, incredible lyrics that he has there. 30 years just go back, listen, 30 years in the business and just enjoy the story and the rhythm that comes out of 30 years in the business. It does break down towards the end. He's like, my lyric is kind of breaking down a bit at the end, but it's brilliant. It reminded me of Greg and Scott that you talk about, trancer and romancer, and it's both of those together. It's the rhythm to get somebody into a trance, and it's those lyrics that have a romantic kind of feel. 30 years in the business, we're already going back in time to a romantic time there. It's beautifully kind of lyrical, but then he's got this force at the same time as well with that. But anyway, so it's not working on King at all. Not working on her one bit. She is not going to be, a groupie on this one at all. Again, I would say to people with this idea of this kind of trancer and romancer idea, go back to this idea of hysterical personality disorder and that combination. There's some strong, I'm not saying anything, but there's some strong similarities around that. And that's what I got for you.
I agree with that on that, Mark. When she's not falling for that, she's not turned to a groupie. She hangs out with Oprah.
Right.
Can you imagine all the people that hang out with Oprah and she's there too? So he's nothing to her as far as on the cool badass scale.
Or maybe Oprah hangs out with her.
Yeah. You never know.
Why would these women say the same thing about you? That you are controlling, that you are abusive, that you tell women when to eat, when to go to the bathroom, when they can sleep, where they can dress. Why would all these women tell these different stories about you if they were not true? And they don't know each other. That defies logic to me.
Right. Until you hear the explanation. Well, you can start a rumor on a guy like me or a celebrity just like that. 30 years in the business, relationships didn't work out. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is push a button on your phone and say, so-and-so did this to me. R. Kelly did this to me. And if you get any traction from that, if you're able to write a book from that, if you're able to get a reality show, okay, one girl, mm-hmm. then any girl that I had a relationship in the past that it just didn't work out, she can come and say the same exact thing.
All right, here we go.
I need help.
What kind of help?
This is the kind of help I need.
Yes, what kind of help? I
need somebody to help me not have a big heart, because my heart is so big. People betray me, and I keep forgiving them.
You sound like you're playing the victim here. You sound like R. Kelly, you do. When I listen to you, it does sound like you're playing the victim
I'm just telling the truth. And the reason I'm emotional, Robert, and I apologize for that, is because this is the first time I was able to say speak. Something. Yeah. I've said nothing.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, fantastic. Look, that I need help, that is not Penelope Pitstop that time. I truly think he is asking for help. Okay, that is a proper 911 call for help. He looks to the exit or some kind of aid. I truly think that is not histrionic. He definitely, inside he's going, I got to get out of this. This is not good news at all. But King is incredulous around this. He picks up on this. Yeah, so he's got this resume statement, big heart, starts a resume statement, but it's incongruent because he pounds his fist at the same time as saying big heart. So a lot of incongruity there. And then I keep forgiving them. That's on the pounding fist. I keep forgiving them. Okay, here's what I think. For him, perceived betrayals are responded to with violence, and then that is framed as big-hearted forgiveness. My guess is if he feels that somebody has betrayed him in some way, His reaction is a violent one, is my perception of this. And he then reframes that aggression as him being big-hearted and him forgiving them. King now starts to pull that first name out, Robert. And she's got a tonality there that I believe what she's trying to do is kind of ramp him up even further by bringing in a mother figure for him, using that first name, using that motherly tonality, because that comfort could well start to put him in an even more emotional position, even regress him somewhat. It is a kind of a masterful move, I think, by King at that point. Brilliant to watch. That's what I got. Scott, what do you got for me?
All right. I don't think he's asking for help, really. I think he's said this before. I think it's in his repertoire when he's talking to girls. That sounds like some emotional something you'd make up if you're an artist and you're trying to relate to someone and make them think you've got all this heavy stuff going on. That's what I think. Because on his delivery, it's too fluid. And it sounds like something to me, it sounds like he's said that before. And I know there's no way I can say, oh, he said it before because of this, but I think his illustrators are too fluid on that. This is an attorney's nightmare because he's at this point, he's adding all this emotion into everything. And that's where he starts to leak these things that get a little bit out of control. And I'm sure his attorney's going, no, shut up. Because he sees, I'm sure if what he was watching is like, oh no, this is going down the wheels are coming off, man. This is not going to be good. He's not going to make the curve when he comes around. And then he puts his hand in his face. I think he kind of gives up in frustration at that point because he's gone that far. He's crossed the line and he's going way emotional at this point. Again, being an artist, most of the time, a true artist is emotional. And I think he's a true artist. So there'll be much more coming from an emotional standpoint than I would call a civilian would be coming from, or they show it anyway. So that's what I've got there. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so I'm going to put him in good company. I am guilty of being too honorable was Prince Andrew. Remember, way back when? Go watch that video. He says, I was guilty of being too honorable. Okay, well, I'm guilty of being too big-hearted. The other thing that I notice here, first of all, that is a hell of a resume statement. I'm too big-hearted. That's a thing where you're trying to distance yourself from the problem by saying it can't be me. No, I couldn't possibly do bad things. I did this. And he is ramping up. He is getting himself into this spun up mode. His brain is starting to change gears. He's in that circular logic performance. The other thing is, if I were going to go on trial for keeping somebody a captive, the last thing I would say is that whole, I'm guilty of being too good-hearted. I do things for them. They do this to me. Mark, you're dead on. Abusers. People who are domestic abusers often will say, why did you make me do that to you? There's a cycle of guilt associated with the person. It creates captivity. In my first book, I had a chapter called Are You? And How to Spot a Liar. I had a chapter called Are You in Love or Captivity? And what people do who are abusive often is they'll bring the smartest, and let's forget male or female, doesn't matter. They'll bring the smartest, most beautiful, intelligent being they've ever met into a place and admire them to the point that they don't have an out. They have no external inputs. And we as people are not made up of what we think we are. We're made up of what other people think we are. And once you start controlling all of those things, food is powerful, Mark, you're right. But if I tell you all the time you're fat and stupid, guess what? You're fat and stupid because that's the only input you're getting because I isolate you. So if I were his attorney, I certainly would say, don't use those words. Those are dangerous words. You're on a slippery slope. I'm not going to go into much more body language because I think you have it, but you can see exactly this behavior that's worked for him. And remember, these guys live in cloistered environments. They're always the prettiest, smartest, everything that they know. As you said, Scott, you came from the business. You know everybody's doing everything short of kissing their, and that makes this person get away with a lot of things they wouldn't do normally. I will tell you that it doesn't matter whether it's a big environment or a small environment. If you're always right, you're always right. And I see in his body language, you see that face starting to crunch up. It's not anger, it's frustration at this point. But that frustration, along with passion, often leads to rage and anger. And you can see it boiling up. You can see his body starting to tense up. We're seeing it here, and Gayle King does a great job of managing it and keeping it right under a boil. And I agree with you, Mark. Now, Robert, that tone of voice is like talking to your kid, and she just reels him in. She's got him locked down. Chase, what do you got?
So I think this request for help is really common in people who have guilt. And like we said before, over time, we tend to say, well, that's not a crime. You know, I'm not going to do it again. Why would I belong in jail if I'm not going to do it again? So we go through this rationalization in our head. And Philip Houston was one of the guys who I think did some of the first research on this that I've ever read. When you ask one of these perpetrators, it's a very common response, especially in interrogation scenarios, which this, for all intents and purposes, is. They say, well, you ask somebody what's called a punishment question. And a punishment question is, what do you think should happen to the person that did this? And typically, in many, many cases, I would say well over 40%, you'll see somebody say, well, I mean, whoever did this, they're obviously a sick person. Definitely not jail time. This person needs some kind of therapy or some kind of help, or maybe, definitely an apology to the family of the victim, and some kind of counseling or therapy, because this person's obviously misunderstood, or they was negligent, or they didn't understand the situation. So that's a very common theme throughout interrogations. You all saw Scott's face. He's seen it. I'm sure Greg's seen it in the interrogation room. And I think it's interesting that there's some eye contact avoidance when he's experiencing this vulnerability, false or true. He does not want to make eye contact during these vulnerable periods or when he's becoming emotional, which is interesting. And I thought, like Mark mentioned earlier, this forgiveness was about punching, and forgiveness was about anger. And on the flip side of that, we also have a subset of people, around 38% of the population, does this not self-harm, but they will induce a severe stimulus on their body in order to calm themselves down or change what their brain's thinking about in that moment. So they'll excite a certain region, and that could be another way that we could interpret this. And the head to hand, or the resting the hand or head on the hand, the tactic was unsuccessful. He did not get the response he wanted. And I think that's a good thing as an interrogator or as any interviewer. You see somebody go through a bunch of this emotional stuff and then rest the head on their hand. That's the time. That's when you need to use their first name. That's when that soft, low statement needs to come out, and you start pulling out more information. Because the door opens at that moment.
She did that too.
Mm-hmm. Did a great job.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pre-confession. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, man. Oof.
I need help.
What kind of help?
This is the kind of help I need.
Yes, what kind of help?
I need somebody to help me not have a big heart, because my heart is so big. People betray me, and I keep forgiving them.
You sound like you're playing the victim here. You sound like R. Kelly. You do. When I listen to you, it does sound like you're playing the victim
I'm just telling the truth. And the reason I'm emotional,
Robert,
and I apologize for that, is because this is the first time I was able to say
speak.
something. Yeah. I've said nothing.
All right. We good?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Robert,
Stop it. Y'all quit playing. Quit playing.
Robert.
I didn't do this stuff. This is not me. Y'all, I'm fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this. I gave y'all 30 years of my career.
Robert.
30 years of my career. Y'all trying to kill me. You're killing me, man. This is not about music. I'm trying to have a relationship with my kids, and I can't do it. Y'all just don't want to believe the truth. You don't want to believe it.
Man, Gayle King. That's the most gangster shit I've ever seen in my life. She didn't move.
Yeah. She could have, right there, she could have totally got away with sit down.
Oh, yeah. I would have sat down.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. She totally could have. Okay, Chase, what do you got?
So I think Suggesting accusations and defining the accusation as someone playing is a really good data point here. And when he's saying, I didn't do this stuff, this isn't me, he's talking about this isn't me anymore, because he immediately shifts to, which he has many times throughout this thing, he shifts to going back. It's been 30 years. Time is the healer. Time has corrected this problem already. We don't need to revisit any of this stuff. And this isn't me. So what that is what we call an interrogation, some dissociative statement or a dissociation statement, where they're dissociating from, that's not me. I'm not the person. And this is offenders tend to see past events as unchangeable. So I can't change it again, but I can change me in the future. So they have a tendency to kind of grow out of the capacity to do it again. And I think that's the belief that we're really dealing with here. Down in the middle, there's a hard crystal belief of, I have outgrown the capacity for this to ever happen again. We do not need to go back and revisit that. That's not me. This isn't me. What we're talking about here isn't me now. Scott?
All right. Well, for the attorney, the nightmare continues. I don't think this is as much anger as it is frustration, because the anger part isn't there. It's mostly, I think it's almost all frustration.
Yeah.
And I think when he gets up, he thinks about kicking that chair too. So watch him. When you watch this the second time, watch him. I think he's getting ready to lean into that chair. Watch the cameraman over in the corner when the shot comes back. Keep an eye on that cameraman. He couldn't care. It didn't bother him but a bit. He's so focused on that, because now if she'd started freaking out, then he's going to have to be a guy and say, hey, or whatever. I know R. Kelly's got guys in there that would help, wrangle him, but he's a big guy, man. For him to be getting up and doing all that stuff, and she just sits there, and somebody that big, wow, that's impressive. And he starts realizing that too, I think, as it goes along. And he's like, geez, I look like an idiot. But for the attorney, this guy's probably jumped off the top of the roof by now, wherever he lives. So, all right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so a few things. Number one, there's an old thing. Alphas don't strut. People strut around alphas to show off. She's alpha in this room, because the minute you move, the person who moves the least in a situation always has the upper hand. If you ever watch people in a room and you're trying to figure out which of the guys is alpha when they're all hanging out, it's the one not doing anything. All the guys doing all this stuff around him, they're all trying to impress him or trying to outshine him. The other guy doesn't need to. And that's what she's doing here, is quietly containing composure and controlling the room. And that's powerful. Great job on that. The other piece that's interesting is I do think it's frustration. I don't think he's angry yet. I think he's just exploding. Look, you can't tell anymore, but I've got hair the color of copper. Along with that comes a temper, believe it or not. So I recognize temper when I see temper. That's temper, frustration, lack of ability to control a situation. And it's one of those things the Army will beat out of you. It's one of those things you learn the hard way when you're a soldier. But along the way, you can recognize people who can't control it and who don't know when it's socially appropriate to lose their cool. I think we're seeing him. I think that's him. I don't think there's an act, because his brain is not working here. You might say, well, he's trying to act. No, his brain is not working. His frontal lobe is off. He's in another gear now. He's in cat brain. He's just saying what comes to the top of his head. And he is frustrated, I'm sure, from what he believes people owe him. And it's just bellowing out. If you don't believe that, here's another piece of behavior. His handler comes over and goes, hey, man, you're losing your cool, and takes him away. That's powerful. It tells you what's going on. This guy didn't prep this. He didn't come in there to do it. In fact, I would suggest that at this point, he thought he would be able to hold his cool, and Gayle King has gotten so far under his skin with simple questioning, that now he's there and he's explosive. So is he angry enough to hurt her? No, I don't think he is. I don't think he's angry. I think he's so frustrated, it's just boiling up and exploding. Now, transplant that back into a house where you're living with people and you're isolated. And for a minute, I'm not saying he did anything to these people, but for a minute, assume that your entire livelihood is attached to him because of a relationship, and all that explosive behavior becomes normal. Then what? So there's all kinds of, we always say truth is a complicated thing, and just because you believe it doesn't make it true. this is an interesting one to pay attention to. And then let's see where he goes next. But there's a hell of a lot of frustration that leads to explosive behavior, and we see it. Mark.
Yeah, I agree. Explosive. He's agitated. He's frustrated. Absolutely. Is he violent? No, he's not. He's not violent at this point. I'll tell you why I don't see elements of violence there in a moment, and potentially why King is able to hold her ground so well. I give her one flinch. There's a little flinch just in her face as he brings this kind of floaty chop gesture, in her kind of territory. If it was a fist and it was less floaty and more direct, then my head would certainly be going right back. But, his gestures are chopping, they're floaty, they're slightly indirect. She gives up no territory in her feet at all. That's where I'm watching. Her feet do not move an inch, and that's her territory, and she's giving none of it up. It's amazing control that he has there. Now, why don't I think he's getting violent at this point? Well, goes with those big, loud chest gestures. That, for me, is usually a display of bravado, but not necessarily aggression. His center of gravity is up high. You can see his feet are coming well off the ground. His center of gravity isn't down into the ground. His hands are up. They're not down. He's not started to crunch in at the stomach. He's not tucked in. His chin isn't down. He's already found exits, by the way. We see him clock, his handlers and his exits. And when he's clocked those, when he's seen those, he actually comes forward a little bit because he sees that actually he's quite safe to create this bravado, histrionic display in front of everybody here. So he gets a bit comfortable with that. So light on his feet there. His pitch as well. His pitch for me is something more like a singer or a preacher. It doesn't have those deep low tones that come when you drop your center of gravity, you drop your hands and you get your weight behind some violent action. That's when somebody's going to do damage. So I don't think he's violent at this point at all. Even so, there could be a hint of it there. And Gayle King does not give up an inch of territory to him. And at that point, she's kind of sealed who is, just as was said there, she's sealed who's in control there. She controls the whole room. The guy on camera is just like, yeah, well, I'll just follow this display then. If Gayle is not bothered by this, I'm just going to track, the action that's going on. Just amazing to see that.
Robert, stop it. Y'all quit playing. Quit playing. Robert. I didn't do this stuff. This is not me. Y'all, I'm fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this. I gave y'all 30 years of my career.
Robert.
30 years of my career. Y'all trying to kill me. You're killing me, man. This is not about music. I'm trying to have a relationship with my kids, and I can't do it. Y'all just don't want to believe the truth. You don't want to believe it.
Good.
I feel like we're sports commentators.
What it is.
Yeah, no kidding.
It is.
It does feel a bit like that today.
It's a battle. It's a great battle.
Is Andrea not telling the truth when she said she was abused by you? Is she not telling the truth?
Absolutely. She's not telling the truth. I love her to death. I have nothing against her still. That is my kid's mother.
She's making that up.
You
why?
notice one thing.
Why is she making that up, Robert?
I'm not disrespecting her by saying she's not telling the truth. I'm just being honest. Somebody sent me something on my phone and it said that I hog-tied her. I don't know how to hog-tie people. What would I hog-tie? My kids is listening to this, all of this nonsense, and I ain't been able to spend no time with them. This is real. This is not a lie. What kind of woman would tear down a dad who's trying to have a relationship with their kids? You know how many kids need a relationship with their father?
What is your relationship with your children?
Oh, my God.
What is your relationship with your children?
Zero. But I know my kids love me. And I'm in love with my kids. I love my kids.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so just a couple of things in this one. As you watch him and he comes back, I think there's a certain amount of lower face is slack and he's ashamed of his behavior he's just had. Almost guarantee you his handler said, hey, you look pretty stupid and you look violent. And he comes back from that screaming fit to this. And now he's trying to make it about family and about connection and about shame with this. And if you notice, he even goes out of his way to say, I'm not saying bad things about her. I'm just saying what I know. I think he starts down that path and then frustration rises again. You see him starting to get emotional. And, that's real emotion. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to go into a lot more in the body language piece. I'll move that down to Chase and let you pick that up.
Sure. I think his when she asked him specifically about abuse, I think his personal definition of what that is might be different than ours. It's a possibility. And failure to identify a perpetrator. He says it's not true, but nothing's a lie. It's not a complete lie. She's making it up. It's completely false. That never happened. It's absolutely a lie. Even throw the absolutely in there if you want to, but call it a lie if it's a lie. And this is kind of more of an unusual circumstance. I think this usually occurs due to some uncertainty of evidence present, to where a person is unwilling to say that someone's lying is usually when a perpetrator or a suspect is uncertain of how much evidence will be presented. So they won't commit to saying that's an absolute lie, because I can go, well, what about this email here? And so there's typically non-committal there. So it's usually not common to see this when the evidence is pretty much known, unless there's something he's worried could surface. And that's all I'll say about that point there. The denials are not about the facts. And they're focused and they're not likely. And the denials are about who he is instead of the facts. And I feel horrible. And I hope to God that his kids are somehow insulated from that. And this is really difficult to watch. This is the hardest, I think the hardest video we've ever done. Mark?
Hey, Chase, let me add one thing I left out. There's a chaff and redirect, a very big one. When I'm accused of hog-tying somebody, I wouldn't say I don't know how to hog-tie them. I'd say, no, it didn't happen. It's just a chaff and redirect. That lack of knowledge about how to do it, well, okay. I even know how to shoot a gun. We've heard that before. I'd never shot a gun before. You hear those things. That's not a denial. That's a chaff and redirect. By chaff and redirect, throwing out a lot of stuff and seeing what sticks, letting the person pick up on it, and you run there.
Mark, is it getting dark where you are?
Yeah, the night is falling.
Wow. We watch you slowly go from like a lighted room to dark.
Yeah. I hope you've all been enjoying the lens flare and the night falling here in Toronto. So first of all, I want to say that what we do see later on, I truly believe is some real emotion from him. Now, it is amped up to a histrionic level. It is super passionate, but there are kernels of truth, of feeling in there. So that's worth thinking about. However, we do start with that word absolutely and then a resume statement. So that's back again. That's a red flag for me. He does create this poetic story. He starts on this poetry again. King interrupts again to interrupt that poetry because she doesn't want to get, drawn into that, doesn't want the audience drawn into that. I think, it's amazing. If you put an auto-tune on what he says, you would probably have an R&B classic happening there. I don't know R. Kelly's, musical genre really well. I think I can probably sing the first few half a line of I Believe I Can Fly. But my guess is that his lyricism is quite romantic, probably. My guess is it's quite, because here's what we get. Here's the themes that he now goes through. He starts with the theme of lies, love, forgiveness, motherhood, kids. Then the next line comes, disrespect, truth, honesty. Then it shifts again, anonymous messages, accusations, bondage, denial. Then we're back again, kids, time, reality, back to truth. And then we get women, dads, relationship, kids, father. Then we go to God. Then we drop down to zero. That is a beautiful poetic move. Goes sky high and then drops to zero. And then we got kids' love, father's love. End of the song. Like, it is a brilliant lyric that he goes through there. Again, you play it back and see what he does there. Clearly a brilliant emotional poet as he goes through that moment, but starts the whole thing off with absolutely, and that resume statement and everything that we've seen before. That poetry is not good enough for me. I'm not buying it personally. Scott, what do you got?
Wow, that was beautiful, Mark.
Yeah.
So I'll just say I didn't see much of a grief muscle anywhere in the whole thing, because that sounded like the wrap up you just did just then. So we'll leave it there at that and leave with that feeling of that.
Is Andrea not telling the truth when she said she was abused by you? Is she not telling the truth?
Absolutely. She's not telling the truth. I love her to death. I have nothing against her still. That is my kid's mother.
She's making that up.
You
why?
notice one thing.
Why is she making that up, Robert?
I'm not disrespecting her by saying she's not telling the truth. I'm just being honest. Somebody sent me something on my phone and it said that I hog-tied her. I don't know how to hog-tie people. What would I hog-tie? My kids is listening to this, all of this nonsense, and I ain't been able to spend no time with them. This is real. This is not a lie. What kind of woman would tear down a dad who's trying to have a relationship with their kids? You know how many kids need a relationship with their father?
What is your relationship with your children?
Oh, my God.
What is your relationship with your children?
Zero. But I know my kids love me. And I'm in love with my kids. I love my kids.
So if you like what we're doing, please subscribe and hit that little bell down there as well. And you'll know we have something come out. Usually it's on Thursdays. Sometimes it's on Wednesdays if I can get it edited quick enough. And if we're not in the prison for copyright infringement. So there's that. All right. We good?
Yeah.
Good.
See you all.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys next time.
Bye now.
No van a ser, no van a ser.